Trapped by Michael Northrop, Chapter 9. How long could we be stuck here? That was the question now. How long, like, conceivably? We had no power, no lights, and the heat was already leaking out of the building through 1,000 cracks and seams and windows. It's only for one night, said Julie. Top, said Pete. The snow could have stopped already. We've got jackets, said Krista. The talk continued along those lines. The tone was, it's not so bad. The tone was, this too shall pass. The tone was forced. It was like listening to your mom trying to cheer you up when you knew she didn't really believe what she was saying. Still, we were going through the motions. If you just started listening now, you might think that we were talking about an overnight camping trip, and a crude one at that. The more we talked, the more we sort of talked ourselves into it. It wasn't so bad. I mean, there was obviously not going to be school tomorrow, so it's not like people would be piling off the buses and tripping over our cold, sleepless bodies. We'd just wait for the storm to taper off, go home, warm up, and spend the day on our couches with blankets and cups of hot chocolate. It'd be a great story. The night I had to sleep on the floor of my high school. Where do they keep the gym mats? Said Krista. And she said it sort of suggestively, like she was suddenly in the middle of a game of truth or dare. I felt my pulse rev a little. I mean, it was dark in here. Who knew what might happen? You know what it's like, right? When your hormones are driving the bus and your brain sitting somewhere in the back near the wheel pump. It's not a rational state, which is why I was probably the only one who wasn't completely thrilled when the emergency lights clicked on above us. It had been maybe half an hour since the power had gone out. I guess the emergency lights were on a delay, so they wouldn't come on every time the power dipped or a fuse was blown. I was sort of surprised the school had them at all. Wasn't this place supposed to be empty at night? The emergency light above us looked sort of like a big legless crab stuck on the wall. It was basically a tan square, not much bigger than the lunchbox. Two bulbs stuck out of the top on little metal stalks. The bulbs were curved like little headlights and pointed out in opposite directions at 45-degree angles. That's what I mean by the crab thing. It looked like a cockeyed creature looking both ways at once, making sure the coast was clear. My mind kept looking that way, constructing a little story. Then it saw 7 humans below us and just froze, its back against the wall. I shook it off and refocused before I did something truly lame, like give the thing a pet name. The light coming out was surprisingly strong. I mean, it's sort of amazing the thing worked at all. It must have been a long time since it's been on. It's like how people leave flashlights in drawers and forget about them. Then when they finally need them, the batteries are dead. Instead, crisp white light cut through the darkness of the hallway, fading as it went. And there was light, said Jason. and small laughs filled the hallway. Things were funny again. The school was still functioning, and everything was going to be fine. Or maybe that's too much to read into two beams of light. But the mood was definitely changed. It was less forced, more real. We could see each other again. We could see the outlines of our coats and backpacks, like dark puddles on the floor. There were a few more jokes. Julie told Pete he looked a lot better with the lights out, and they both laughed. Those two sort of knew each other, and then our new optimism led us to the next topic. What else could we do to improve our situation for the night? We should go to our lockers, said Krista. I was vaguely aware that there were emergency lights scattered throughout the school. I tried to remember where I'd seen them, like if there was one near my locker, but they were the sort of things you didn't pay attention to most of the time. I stood up and looked through the glass of the hallway. It was a bad angle, but I pressed my forehead to the cold glass, and I could see some windows along the side of the main building, lit now and just visible through the falling snow. I like to get my sweatshirt, said Julie. That kind of brought the topic back to the heat. Was it colder already? It felt like maybe it was. After that, going back to the lockers was an easy sell. And you might be thinking, who needs to sell it? If anyone wanted to go back to their lockers, they could just go, right? With Gosel still somewhere out in the snow, there were no teachers to tell us what to do. And all that's true, but for whatever reason, it sort of seemed important that we all agreed on these first moves we made. I didn't know if it was because of the situation. Emergency lights made it an official emergency, right? Or because we were used to being told what to do here, or because we were just scared. All I know is that we took our sweet time getting going. Ever since we started making our way toward the lockers, we basically stuck together. I mean, we strung the line out enough so that it wasn't obvious, but no one, not even Les, was ever really out of earshot. It helped that we were all sophomores and freshmen, so our lockers were in the same area. I guess it made sense that we'd be the last ones here. Juniors and seniors wouldn't get stuck waiting for rides. They had their own cars, or friends who did. Anyway, underclassmen had their lockers in the same few hallways. The upperclassmen called it Loser's Alley. That stung at first, but you learn pretty quickly that it was better to hang out among your own than to drift into the juniors and seniors territory. We'll meet back here, okay? Said Krista as the girls headed down the left hallway where the freshmen had their lockers. Of course we would. They were the only girls here. In the half-lit hallway, her voice hit me like a splash of warm water. We all went to our lockers to forage. The emergency lights were pretty far apart. There was basically one per alley. On the trip over, things had come on the trip over, things had come in and out of view as we walked. Things would get brighter as we approached the lights in the center of the straightways, and more shadowy as we approached the corners. Pete was up front the whole time, blazing away with his flashlight out. It really was pretty bright, but it seemed puny in the dark patches. It wasn't a real flashlight. It was like a toy. I was still kind of jealous, though. I was lucky once we reached the lockers. Mine was just a few feet to the side of the emergency light. Not that I really needed it to open the lock. How many times had I spun my combination this year? It was like a reflex by now. Still, the light helped me identify my locker number and rummage through the contents. My locker was a mess. I thought about asking Pete if I could borrow his phone, and then I thought about asking Jason because he was closer, and just the normal glow from the screen would be enough. I didn't, to be brutally honest. I was a little embarrassed about not having my own phone with me. I thought about it sitting there on my dresser where I left it. I felt like a butt-kissing capital L loser. In the end, I just pushed my hand around in the dark locker like I was noodling for catfish. I really should clean this thing out, I thought, as I stuck my fingers into a pile of old papers and came back out with a snack pack of Oreos. When were these from? September? I stuck them deep into my pocket, then looked around to see if anyone had heard the crinkle of the foil wrapper. Stale or not, this was the only food I had. Really, I had half a mind to scarf the Oreos on the way back, maybe in the shadowy stretches in between lights. But it occurred to me that I might need them for trading. I'm sure some of the others were turning up food too. I looked over at Les, almost directly across the hall from me, and saw that he had two lockers open. He must have spied on his neighbor and memorized his combination, or maybe he'd just beaten it out of him. He'd already gone through his own locker and had something folded over his right arm. Now he was pushing through the contents of the other locker, looking for treasure. I turned back to mine and made another quick pass through it. Nothing. I slammed it shut. We made our way back to the hallway outside the gym. We were like a band of gypsies with random scavenged items in our arms. Sweatshirts, spare shirts, gym clothes. Anything soft and potentially warm was carried off. Pete had a ski hat with a little pom-pom on top, sticking out of the crook of his arm like a limp rabbit. I remember the morning he'd shown up wearing that thing. We'd ragged him mercilessly about it, and he'd stuck it all the way in the back of his locker. If this storm hadn't happened, he probably never would have taken it out again. Now he was carrying it out in the open, like a prize. There was no food visible among the prizes, though. Everyone must have made the same decision I had and hidden it. Any sharing or trading would be done later among friends. I guess this was when we started keeping secrets. Everyone was scanning everyone else's hall, eyes drifting to the side as we passed under a light. Krista had already put her tattooist soccer sweatshirt on over her sweater and put her jacket back on over both. It wasn't really cold enough to need that many layers yet. She wasn't bundled up against the cold. She was bundled up against the possibility of cold. We talked off and on for hours back in the little hallway that had become our base for the night. We talked about a lot of things. Gosel, he's probably in one of those houses up on the slope in front of a nice wood fire, we agreed. The buses we would have been on, half of them wouldn't make the hills. The weatherman on TV, Hilton Kalish, wrong again. I can't believe they pay that guy. We watched the emergency lights for signs that it was dimming and tested the air for any taste of real cold creeping in. We took short sips from the drinking fountain because there were no emergency lights in the bathrooms. I borrowed Jason's phone from my first trip to the men's room, but the faint blue light wasn't much use. I was a little off target, and I wasn't the only one. By the time I zipped up with the phone face up on the top of the urinal, lighting the metal handle, I knew that place was going to be a slippery, stinking mess before too long. Back in the hallway, we made nests of whatever we had. The lights held for now. I think we all knew that they ran on batteries and that this little reprieve wouldn't last long. But not one of us thought that we'd be here another night. The idea seemed totally crazy. Every once in a while, someone would check a cell phone. The screen popped on in the dim light, and everyone would look over. But there was never anything to report. No service, no messages, no nothing. We just thought the lines were still jammed or the service was still muffled by all the snow. Then one of us would walk over to the window and look out at the road. Nothing to report there either, just more snow. You could feel the eyes on you when you got up to look out. At first we said things like still coming down, but after a while we just said, yep. And sometimes a strong gust of wind would rattle the glass. The storm letting us know it was still out there without anyone having to look. It was pretty clear by then that no one was coming for us that night. Eventually, there was nothing left to do but close our eyes and drift off. It was a bummer, and the sort of fun sleepover mood from before that had pretty well washed away. We were resigned to a full night of hard floors and dark bathrooms. But we all went to sleep thinking that tomorrow would be the day after. We thought it would be the day the plows cleaned up the big storm. Life went back to normal, and we went home. We weren't even close.